Good morning, guys. Here we are. We'll go ahead and continue our study this morning. Actually, I think we're in the last leg of this study as of this morning. We've just finished a section. We looked at highlighted portions from chapter 29 through I think 47 or 48 actually. Because there is where primarily the story of Joseph picks up, but we looked at what I called snapshots. We looked at 10 snapshots out of Jacob's life, just pictures of these moments in time and what we can learn about Jacob's example in that experience. And of course, we're weaving the story together. When we left Jacob, of course, he was in the land of Canaan, and now we're picking up here in chapter 48, where he will finish out his life here on earth in Egypt. And this is kind of not kind of. It's really, I've been looking forward to this section here. We're going to be looking at chapters 48 and 49 for quite some time, because Jacob's life, in concert with what we see as an example through the patriarchs, he ends his life in blessing, and the power of blessing. You know, a couple of years ago at the beginning of this study, we looked at Jacob stealing the blessing, and we spent quite some time talking about that. You know, just what is a blessing and what is, it was a really enriching time for me to gain understanding of what the power of a blessing is, and more of what it's about. In fact, now I get invited to do this workshop that I developed out of this class in other places, and I call it the power of a father's blessing. And every time I get to do this, it's just electric in there. When you see a room full of men learning a model, that, remember how we went through that as well, and it's a really powerful thing. Well, now we're going to see this, and we're launching out this morning on this last section, chapters 48, 49. But it's only appropriate that we look at the first blessing, which happens to be what we looked at last week with Ephraim and Manasseh, Joseph's two grandsons. But we're gonna again look at that today from just a little bit different perspective. We're going to read that text in 8 through 22 of chapter 48. So why don't you turn there, and would somebody begin reading at verse 8 of chapter 48? Notice we're looking at Genesis 48, 49, we're calling this to bless. We're looking at the idea of blessing, to bless, and that's what I've called it. And so would somebody begin reading at verse 8, and we'll read 8 through 22.
Then Israel saw Joseph's sons and said, "Who are these?" Joseph said to his father, "They are my sons, whom God has given me in this place." And he said, "Please bring them to me, and I'll bless them." Now the eyes of Israel were dim with age, so that he could not see. Then Joseph brought them near him, and he kissed them and embraced them.
Israel said to Joseph, "I never expected to see your face, and behold, God has let me see your children as well." Then Joseph took them from his knees and bowed with his face to the ground. Joseph took them both, Ephraim with his right hand toward Israel's left, and Manasseh with his left hand toward Israel's right, and brought them close to him. But Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on the hand of Ephraim, who was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, crossing his hands, although Manasseh was the firstborn.
Then he blessed Joseph and said, "May the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, God who has been my shepherd all my life to this day, the angel who has delivered me from all harm, may he bless his voice. May it be called by my name and the names of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and may they increase greatly upon the earth." When Joseph saw his father placing his right hand on Ephraim's head, he was displeased. So he took a hold of his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. Joseph said to one's the firstborn, put your right hand on his head.
But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He too will become a people, and he too will become great. Nevertheless, his younger brother will be greater than he, and his descendants will become of nations. He blessed them that day and said, in your name will Israel pronounce this blessing. May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. So he put Ephraim ahead of Manasseh. And Israel said to Joseph, I am about to die, but God will be with you and take you back to the land of your fathers. And to you, as one who is over your brothers, I give the ridge of land. I give the ridge of land I took from the Amorites with my sword and my bow.
Okay, good. Thank you. And of course, last week we looked at that little phrase in there, verse 20, may God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. And we tie that into the modern Jewish blessing, the Sabbath blessing, 2 sons. And we looked at that and had some fun looking at that last week. This week, in the same text, we're going to focus in on yet another 2 verses, verses 15 and 16. And let me go through and read it. I've stated the verse from the New American Standard Version, and I put it into a format that I think is a way at least I can understand the format of the content of these 2 verses. This is, it says, and he, that would be Jacob, blessed Joseph. Now what is it you pick up there? It says he blessed Joseph. He's blessing the grandsons in the name of Joseph. Joseph is getting a double blessing via his 2 grandsons, Ephraim and Manasseh. So this is the first blessing, and I think we should take note of this because Joseph is the second to the youngest son, but yet he's receiving the first blessing from his father, and he's receiving a double portion of that blessing. And so he, Jacob, blessed Joseph, which is actually the 2 sons, and said, the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked. Then parallel phrase, the God who has been my shepherd all of my life to this day. And then C, parallel phrase, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil. Do you see how this is, he's setting it up with these 3 phrases, and then he releases, bless the lads. May God, who has done all of this in history, may God, who has done all of this in my life up until this very day, and the angel who has not only led me, but has delivered me and redeemed me from all evil, now bless you. Okay? We're going to talk a little bit more. Bless the lads. He blesses them in parallel. He doesn't point one over the other. Ephraim and Manasseh get the same blessing. But yet, in the text it reads, when Joseph responds negatively to his father, he says he does differentiate. But here in the blessing itself, it's to the boys together. And then number 1, and may, this is an amplification of the blessing. This is more detail of the blessing. 1, may my name live on in them. That's number 1. We're going to go into more detail on this. Number 2, and of course that corresponds with B. He's referring 1 to B. In a sense, there can be some parallel there. Number 2, and the names of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, that would correspond to A. Those 2 are in parallel, but we lose the correlation in C, the latter, number 3. And may they, he projects out, may they grow, both of them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. There is an allusion there to fish. Didn't you get that in the text? Some of the English texts read, may they be like the fish of the sea. Something, that's a loose paraphrase. But it's the idea of multiplication, the idea of growth. And it's really in sync with what the Abrahamic blessing is, is that I'll make you a multitude, I'll make you a nation. It's the continuation of this blessing on now to the fourth generation. Okay, so that's an overview. And we're looking at, again, the context to bless. And so here is what I would call the big idea here. The big idea that I'd like to suggest to you is that Jacob now in his life now at this stage, he's now demonstrating a transition in his perspective. A transition in perspective. I would call that transition in perspective, or at least what we call it, would be transformation. I think Jacob is a transformed man, although he's not a perfect man. Transformation does not mean perfection, but I think Jacob has adopted a new set of eyes. And that's how I'm choosing to interpret this whole last phase of his life. When it occurred and how it occurred, it was probably on several occasions. I have to believe, and I think we have to believe, that the wrestling with the angel back several chapters ago had an amazing effect, a huge effect on his life. I don't know if it was the only thing. I think it was the daily life experiences over time that now at this age and stage in life, he sees things differently. That's what we're going to talk about. It's no different than you and I. I've got to believe, Bill Schweitzer is a different man than he was in his 20s. And I've got to believe that I'm a different man. I see things differently. I think all of us would see things differently than we did in our 20s. And I'm seeing some nods. So he's demonstrating a transition in perspective, the same transition being what we are all as human beings invited to embrace. And we could not be looking at this at any better time than Holy Week this week, because it has everything to do with the gospel and the fruit of the gospel through Christ. We are invited to embrace something new. That is by far the message of the life of Jesus, is that there is something new happening for all of humanity, that we are invited to embrace something new. And it is through what Christ has done and accomplished through what we are celebrating this week that makes this new perspective possible. It's not just a perspective that is transformational, is what we're talking about. So here is the big idea. The normal mode of our way of thinking, the default human mode, the default male mode, would be represented really loosely by this picture here. And what it just means is my life represented by the arrow. Now just disregard the colors there. It's just, think of, you could put a person's head in there. But it's the idea that all of life is centered around me. And our culture is at this level. We are in a culture that I would call as self-branding and self-orbital. Would you ever have imagined that you could go into in a home, in a living room, and everyone in that living room, part of that family, is at that very moment in their own self-orbital world on their devices doing stuff, whatever they're doing, playing brickbat or watching a movie or doing email. It is unprecedented, guys, that this is so true. We've made fun of, we've used examples of people in restaurants who are sitting across the table from each other, each on their device. I mean, this is so common today, and I'm calling that a self-orbital world. And another degree of that is the idea of self-branding. Facebook would be, and I'm not anti this stuff. I'm not engaged in Facebook myself. I just don't have time to deal with that. But but it's an important thing to a lot of people. But it creates a self-branding. You know, this is what I had for lunch today. Well, who in the sorry, I just about slipped there. Who really cares? You know, well, evidently someone cares. And with the world as your environment, you're going to see some, well, I had that last week, you know, and you get this conversation going. But it's all about promoting ourselves, and it creates a competitive environment that I really question the health of that whole thing. And I've been thinking about this in regard to many things, but that's not why we're here to talk about that. But our culture is only reflecting and amplifying what is innately true within us as human beings, is this desire for life to revolve around the me. That I would look at that as the default human mode of operating. Now, the slash line represents the transitional position that now Jacob has evolved into, has transitioned into, is his life now. He sees himself having fallen into something. We could have grayed that out a little bit. Something that's not well defined, but something very, very large. That is an amazing transition that takes place. And where now I don't need this. Jacob doesn't need this anymore. And it, and what enforces this idea, where did I get this idea, is what he is doing at this occasion in his life, that being to bless. To bless. Okay, so being the center of attention, to have falling, Jacob allowed himself to fall, which is not natural, to fall, to let go, to release, and now he sees himself as part of something grand, even though there's mystery, but it is, however, it is moving in a direction, and that we're going to get into that. So I'll move that now. So I just took that idea and expanded it across the screen. That here is Jacob, and I'm going to make 3 observations regarding this new perspective. Jacob, number 1. Jacob sees himself as part of something much larger. Okay, he's here, and the larger is here, and that history is going somewhere, depicted by the arrow. It is moving, and thus there is purpose in this world. It's not a random, just a random, selective, chaotic type of world, but there is some purpose, even though he might not understand the full purpose. He's talking from a framework of purpose in what he's saying. And the idea in the text, the words, Abraham, he ties Abraham into the history of Abraham into this moment. He ties his father Isaac into this moment. He uses the angel who has protected him and redeemed him in life. He's tying the historical aspects of his life going back generations to this very moment. Thus, he's seeing himself as part of something that has existed for quite some time, and that the very blessing itself points to the fact that it is going to continue on, and that his role is an important role, but in the scheme of things, it's only just a drop in the bucket of what this grand life and this grand happening. The shepherd, God, he speaks of God as a shepherd who is shepherding him, and the angel who is protecting him. Notice leading and protecting in his blessing. So there's number 1. He has allowed himself, I keep using this term, because this is a major transition in a man's life when we can let go and allow ourselves to fall. It is so counterintuitive, because what we want is to hang on and maintain control. But if we allow it, but the calling of the gospel in our lives, this is it's not a it has a daily and a moment application to let go of control. And it's at this age in life where we really start to understand what that means. So there's number one. And then here's observation number two. Within this larger perspective, Jacob sees himself as an agent. Okay, as an agent. To impart what has been given to him. Now, Jesus spoke of agency. How did any? I just want to know if it's clicking. How did Jesus speak of agency? Agency. Agency is where you're representing and acting in behalf of something much larger.
Great Commission, yeah.
What's that?
The Great Commission.
The Great Commission, yes. Go into all the world. Even in a, what?
And make disciples.
Make disciples. I think even in a more primary and, yeah, that's very true. In an illustrative sense, you are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth. You see, that's agency, going into all the world. We are agents. We have been adopted into agency. And it's at this point in life that Jacob is acting as an agent to impart what has been given to him. We can't impart what we have not received. Now, the thing about Christian transformation, the Bible, the New Testament, is just filled with the truth of what we are now in Christ. It is amazing. You know, you are dead and your life is hid with Christ in God. And, you know, geez, I'm drawing a blank right now, but it's just filled with especially in the epistles, Paul lays this out of the enriched placement that we have moved from darkness to light and the enrichment. But I venture to say that it takes a long time to really grasp in an experiential sense what that all means. And it's all about identity. You know, it's all about our identity. I think of Ephesians 2:10. For you, we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God has foreordained to all those who will walk in them. That's an amazing verse of our identity. And it takes a while. You know, that you've heard this poem that I have stated here on a couple occasions. It's one of my favorites. It's because I get it. My 50th year had come and gone. Maybe your 60th, I don't know. My 50th year had come and gone. I sat a solitary man in a crowded London shop, open book, empty cup, on a marble tabletop. While on the shop and street I gazed, suddenly my body blazed. And in 20 minutes, more or less, oh, so great my happiness, I am blessed and can bless. Now, if I would have read that in my 20s or 30s or 40s or even my 50s, I wouldn't have got it. But I get it. In a man's life, there comes a time when all of a sudden it's like wakening up. Maybe it's not an experience. Maybe it's over time. And you wake up one morning and you go, I am a blessed man. Now, I'm not a perfect man, and my life is far from perfect, but I am a blessed man. And when you and I walk into that and when we embrace that and get it, We have something to offer. We have something to offer others in through that, because we can only give what has been received. And this is, Jacob is demonstrating this. He goes, it's been given to him. He is blessed. It's what it means to be blessed, is to realize what we have been given. Far from, my life, my experience is far from perfect. That's not what we're talking about. We may be struggling in whatever area we're struggling in, but overall, we are blessed, and we have none other than God Himself through Christ to thank for that. It's amazing. So we are blessed. Number 3, acting within this framework of blessing, of agency, he's an agent. He not only imparts life for the moment. Now, the language I'm using is what is happening here. He's imparting life, life-giving for the moment, but he projects that life into the future. And I use the correlation, an agrarian correlation, because of my understanding of the Bible. It's much like a farmer. Jesus uses the analogy of the farmer who plants the seed. The farmer tills the soil, prepares the soil, plants the seed, and then waters the soil, and then he waits, And why? Why does a farmer plant? Because the farmer believes by faith there's going to be a harvest. There's going to be something that comes up, and that's faith. So by faith, every year. He plants the seed, and he says he plants the seed in this way. The quote, "May they grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth." Okay, now quickly, what does this mean for you and I? So what does this mean? I've got 3 columns, and this transitional view, this change in perspective, what does this mean? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different areas of our lives, and what this transition looks like, and I'll explain it here. It looks like more of this, and we want to be less of this. This would be our default way of thinking and perspective, over here. But we want to move more to here, more of this. So in regard to vision, in life, over here our default mode is that we got to be part of something. Even in a Christian context, we're going to go and do great things for God, marvelous things, and important things, and good things. But in some cases, it may be lesser things. I'm going to make, $10 million or whatever it is, grandiose and broad. I want to make an impact in my life. What young man doesn't, or person in general? But here, in this stage of life, this is all happening in a bedroom, in a very closed world. Jacob's world has closed up, just like you and I. Our world, as we get older, it's gonna shrink. And what we'll have is our memories and our life that we can impart. And notice now it's going local and very deep. Guys, it's relationships here, local and deep. Time. What is my view of time? My default mode is that I am present here, but my head is elsewhere. I am always moving. I'm not in sync. I'm either holding on to the regrets of the past or moving ahead to the next appointment. But God, to get our bodies all in sync in one place it takes a while. To be fully present is where we want to be in relation to time. Fully present. That is the only place we can really live, is in the now, right now. Schedule. You know what? I'm going to end here because I want to pick up with this next week. And so I'm not going to cram this thing through here. I'm going to be fully present. And we're not going to be elsewhere. I don't want you to be elsewhere. And so we're going to pick up with this slide next week, and we'll move on. So Have a good week. Have a great Easter. Yes.
Mike, there's something that's interesting in that whole verse, because the very last verse